Story 1 of 49. Australia faces fuel shortages amid Middle East conflict, diversifies imports. Australia faces fuel shortages amid Middle East conflict, diversifies imports. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 55 cargoes of crude oil and refined fuels have arrived or are en route to Australia in April from the US, South America, and Africa, as of April 3 to 4, 2026. Energy Minister Chris Bowen stated that 410 service stations were without diesel and 193 were without petrol as of April 3 to 4, 2026. Asia traditionally supplies 80% of Australia's liquid fuel needs, but Middle East conflict has disrupted these supplies. Viva Energy secured additional cargoes from the US and South America, ensuring fuel flow into May and crude oil into June for its Geelong refinery. The federal government announced it will underwrite spot fuel cargo purchases via Export Finance Australia to mitigate risks for smaller importers. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH The Age report 193 service stations without petrol, while ABC reports 145 stations without unleaded petrol, and 48 stations out of stock entirely in NSW. SMH The Age mention 410 stations without diesel, while ABC does not specify a separate diesel-only shortage figure but notes NSW shortages are severe. ABC states 53 ships are en route with 3.7 billion litres of fuel, while SMH The Age report 55 cargoes, no volume specified, without a direct litre count. This story was covered by ABC News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 2 of 49. Australia urges ceasefire inclusion of Lebanon amid escalating Israel-Hezbollah conflict. Australia urges ceasefire inclusion of Lebanon amid escalating Israel-Hezbollah conflict. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Foreign Minister Penny Wong stated the humanitarian situation in Lebanon is deeply concerning following Israeli airstrikes on April 8, 2026. Israel launched airstrikes on over 100 targets in Lebanon overnight, April 7 to 8, 2026, killing at least 254 people and injuring 100+. Australia, alongside Brazil, Colombia, Indonesia, Jordan, Sierra Leone, and the UK, issued a joint statement calling for the ceasefire to include Lebanon and for all parties to observe international humanitarian law. The ceasefire between the US and Iran, brokered on April 7, 2026, is described as fragile and at risk if fighting in Lebanon continues. Indonesian peacekeepers were killed in the conflict in Lebanon, as mentioned by Penny Wong. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the ceasefire deal did not include Lebanon according to Israel's Prime Minister, while Iran claims it did include Lebanon. Article 2, Guardian, mentions the death toll from the April 7 strikes as 254 killed and 837 injured, while Article 1, Newskamau, reports 100+ injured, creating a discrepancy in injury numbers. Article 2, Guardian, includes a separate story about human bones found on Rottnest Island, which is not mentioned in the other articles. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Story 3 of 49. Australians celebrate Good Friday with church services, seafood, and public events. Australians celebrate Good Friday with church services, seafood, and public events. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Good Friday was marked with church services across Australia, including St Patrick's Cathedral in Sydney and St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney's CBD. The Sydney Fish Market saw queues of people at 5 a.m. on Good Friday, with about 60,000 visitors expected and 650 tons of seafood sold over the long weekend. The Sydney Fish Market opened at its new waterfront location in January 2026, and staff began preparations at around 2 a.m. on Good Friday. The Brisbane to Gladstone yacht race began on Good Friday with 29 boats participating in rainy conditions. The Prime Minister released an Easter message calling on Australians to reflect on values of love and forgiveness and thanking essential workers. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the Sydney Fish Market opened at 7 a.m. on Good Friday, while it also states staff began working at 2 a.m., but Newscomau does not specify opening times. ABC mentions a 25-kilometer pilgrimage from Palmerston to Darwin, but Newscomau does not reference this specific event. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Story 4 of 49. Chilean ex-nanny Adriana Rivas loses legal battle, faces extradition for Pinochet-era kidnapping allegations. Chilean ex-nanny Adriana Rivas loses legal battle, faces extradition for Pinochet-era kidnapping allegations. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Adriana Elcira Rivas, 72, is accused of participating in the kidnapping and torture of 7 people under Augusto Pinochet's regime in the 1970s. Rivas worked as a nanny in Sydney's eastern suburbs, including Bondi, and a cleaner in Australia for over 30 years before her arrest in 2019. She was arrested in February 2019 at the request of Chilean prosecutors and has been in custody since, fighting extradition for 7 years. Federal Court Justice Michael Lee dismissed her final legal challenge on April 7, 2026, ruling that the offenses were properly characterized as aggravated kidnapping, not crimes against humanity. Chilean prosecutors allege Rivas was part of the National Intelligence Directorate, DINA, brigade that tortured and disappeared victims, including a 5 months pregnant woman. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC article states Rivas denies involvement in its Pinochet regime's abuses, while The Guardian frames her denial more broadly as denying the allegations entirely. The ABC includes a quote from Navarro about victims' remains being disappeared in graphic detail, which The Guardian does not repeat verbatim in its summary. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 5 of 49. How to earn Qantas points post-RBA interchange fee cuts and surcharge ban. How to earn Qantas points post-RBA interchange fee cuts and surcharge ban. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Debit and credit surcharges were banned starting October 1, 2026, removing merchant fees for card payments. The Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, slashed credit card interchange fees by 63%, from 0.8% to 0.3%, effective October 1, 2026. Qantas Health Insurance offers 140,000 Qantas points as a sign-up bonus for new customers joining by April 9, 2026. Qantas Home Loans provides 100,000 Qantas points annually for the life of the loan. Everyday Rewards, Woolworths, Big W, BWS, converts points to Qantas at a 2-to-1 ratio. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 6 of 49. Confidential report reveals misconduct by former Australian Home Affairs Secretary Michael Pezzullo. Confidential report reveals misconduct by former Australian Home Affairs Secretary Michael Pezzullo. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Former Home Affairs Secretary Michael Pezzullo was sacked in late 2023 after an inquiry found he breached the Australian Public Service Code of Conduct at least 14 times. The inquiry was conducted by former senior public servant Linnell Briggs on behalf of the Australian Public Service Commission. The inquiry focused on Pezzullo's secret dealings with Liberal Party powerbroker Scott Briggs, including encrypted messages exchanged over WhatsApp and Signal. The report found Pezzullo's conduct was ill-advised, reckless, and a step too far in terms of the boundaries of normal public service practice. Pezzullo directed a $79,500 government contract in 2021 involving Australia's quarantine system to Scott Briggs' lobbying firm DPG Advisory without declaring a conflict of interest. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Pezzullo was stripped of his Order of Australia appointment in September 2024, while SMH and The Age do not mention this specific detail. The Guardian mentions Pezzullo was retained as Home Affairs boss after the Albanese government was elected in May 2022, while SMH and The Age do not explicitly state this. The Guardian notes that the inquiry was triggered by revelations in The Age and 60 Minutes, while SMH and The Age only mention 60 Minutes. This story was covered by The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 7 of 49. Artemis II mission breaks Apollo 13 distance record during lunar flyby. Artemis II mission breaks Apollo 13 distance record during lunar flyby. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Artemis II astronauts surpassed the Apollo 13 distance record of 400,171 kilometers from Earth, reaching a maximum distance of 406,771 kilometers, 252,756 miles. The Artemis II crew consists of NASA astronauts Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen. The Artemis II mission launched on April 1, 2026, from Kennedy Space Center, Florida. The lunar flyby occurred on April 6, 2026, with a 6-hour observation period around the Moon. The Orion spacecraft passed within 6,545 kilometers (4,070 miles) of the lunar surface during the flyby. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report the maximum distance reached by Artemis II as 406,771 kilometers, but Newscomow states 406,778 kilometers, a minor discrepancy. ABC and Guardian mention the Artemis II crew reached the lunar sphere of influence on April 6, while Newscomow does not specify the exact date for this milestone. The Guardian states the Artemis II crew observed the Orientale Basin on April 6, while ABC and Newscomow mention this observation occurred on April 7. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Story 8 of 49. Rapper Offset shot outside Florida casino, stable but hospitalized. Rapper Offset shot outside Florida casino, stable but hospitalized. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Rapper Offset, Kiari Kendall Cephas, was shot outside the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Hollywood, Florida, on April 7, 2026. Offset is in stable condition and being closely monitored in hospital. 2 people were detained by Seminole police after the shooting, and the site remains secure with no public threat. Offset was formerly married to Cardi B, with whom he has 3 children. Offset and Cardi B were secretly married in September 2017 in Atlanta. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the shooting occurred on Monday, April 7, 2026, while ABC explicitly mentions it happened on Monday evening, but neither source provides a conflicting time or date. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 9 of 49. 9 men charged in alleged Australian drug smuggling syndicate using boats and mothership. 9 men charged in alleged Australian drug smuggling syndicate using boats and mothership. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 9 men, aged 31 to 72, were arrested in Victoria, 8, and Sydney, 1, over alleged cocaine and methamphetamine smuggling plans. Operation Bruce Cremorne was a 10-month joint investigation by Victoria Police, Australian Federal Police, and Border Force. Police became suspicious after a trawler sank off Victoria's Port Albert in May 2025, with crew rescued in rough weather. The syndicate allegedly planned to smuggle up to 3.5 tons of cocaine via Bay Strait using a mothership and smaller boats. 7 of the 9 men face potential life sentences if convicted. Charges include conspiracy to import cocaine, trafficking methamphetamine, and firearms offenses. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC states the syndicate attempted to bring in shipments of up to 3.5 tons of cocaine, while The Guardian does not specify a quantity for cocaine but mentions tons generally. The ABC does not mention the 30 kilograms methamphetamine seizure in Perth, only the 41 kilograms cocaine seizure in regional Victoria, while The Guardian includes both. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 10 of 49. Dezi Freeman's arrest, death, and investigation into his 7-month evasion of police. Dezi Freeman's arrest, death, and investigation into his 7-month evasion of police. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Dezi Freeman was shot dead by Victoria Police on the 1st of April, 2026, Monday, at a property in Tholagolong, near the NSW border, after a 3-hour standoff. Freeman had been on the run since August 2025 after fatally shooting Detective Leading Senior Constable Neil Thompson and Senior Constable Vadim de Wart-Hottet in Porpunka, northeast Victoria. Freeman was hiding in a makeshift shelter resembling a shipping container and caravan on a remote property in Tholagolong, over 150 kilometers from his home. Freeman emerged from the container wrapped in a blanket and clutching a gun, which was later confirmed to have been taken from one of the officers he killed in August. Up to 8 officers from Victoria Police's Special Operations Group fired their weapons at Freeman, who fired 2 shots before being shot more than 20 times. But not all outlets told the same story. The Age reports Freeman was released without charge pending further inquiries, while other sources, ABC, Guardian, only state he will be interviewed by police without mentioning release. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Story 11 of 49. Australia's smallest town Kaladi, population 2, is up for sale with roadhouse and post office. Australia's smallest town Kaladi, population 2, is up for sale with roadhouse and post office. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kaladi is a town in outback Queensland with a population of exactly 2 residents, Carol Yarrow and Joe Cornell. The entire town, including the Foxtrap Roadhouse, 4-bedroom home, post office, and pub, is listed for sale at $400,000. Kaladi retains its own postcode, 4479, due to the operational post office within the roadhouse. The town's 2 residents, Carol Yarrow, 70, and Joe Cornell, are selling after 3 years of operation, with Yarrow retiring and Cornell relocating closer to family. Kaladi's population peaked at roughly 270 in the 20th century before declining after the railway station and school closed in 1974. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Kaladi is more than 800 kilometers west of Brisbane, while the ABC says it is a 9-hour drive west of Brisbane, no explicit distance given. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 12 of 49. Australia's used EV prices surge while petrol-diesel prices drop amid fuel crisis. Australia's used EV prices surge while petrol-diesel prices drop amid fuel crisis. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tesla Model Y used prices rose 3.63%, The Age, and 6% plus in last 2 weeks of March, Guardian. Tesla Model 3 used prices rose 1.39%, The Age, and 6% plus, Guardian, in recent weeks. Used EV supply is extremely tight, Polestar 2 down to 2 to 3 days, The Age, Milligram ZS down to 5 days, The Age, BYD Atto 3 down to 8.6 days, The Age. Used petrol-diesel prices fell sharply, Mahindra XUV 3X0 down 15.5%, The Age, Haval H6 GT down 11.9%, The Age, and 20.5%, The Age. EV rental demand surged 70% year-over-year, Guardian, amid petrol price hikes. But not all outlets told the same story. The Age says Tesla Model Y rose 3.63% in the past fortnight, while Guardian says it rose 6% plus in last 2 weeks of March. The Age reports Haval H6 GT fell 11.9% and 20.5%, 2 separate figures, but Guardian does not mention specific percentage drops for Haval models. The Age states since vehicles were first listed Tesla Model Y rose 6.3%, but Guardian only mentions recent 2-week rise without long-term comparison. This story was covered by The Guardian and The Age. Story 13 of 49. Rex Heuermann pleads guilty to Gilgo Beach serial killings of 8 women. Rex Heuermann pleads guilty to Gilgo Beach serial killings of 8 women. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Rex Heuermann, a 62-year-old Long Island architect, pleaded guilty on April 8, 2026, to 7 murders and admitted an 8th, Karen Vergata, in the Gilgo Beach killings. Heuermann confessed to strangling all 8 victims, dismembering some, and dumping their remains in marshland along Long Island's south coast, including Gilgo Beach. The victims were Sandra Costilla, 1993, Karen Vergata, 1996, Valerie Mack, 2000, Jessica Taylor, 2003, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 2007, Melissa Barthelemy, 2009, Megan Waterman, 2010, and Amber Lynn Costello, 2010. Heuermann was arrested in July 2023 in Manhattan after DNA from a discarded pizza box matched evidence from the crime scenes. Heuermann lived in Massapequa Park, Long Island, and used burner phones to contact victims, with some remains found near Gilgo Beach and others in locations like Fire Island and the Hamptons. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC state Heuermann will be sentenced on June 17, 2026, while Newskamau mentions June 17 without a year, but all other sources confirm the year 2026. The Age and Newskamau mention Heuermann's daughter Victoria crying in court, but The Guardian does not explicitly state this, only that she was present and brought to tears. Newskamau and The Age describe Heuermann's basement as squalid, while The Guardian and ABC do not provide a specific description of the basement's condition. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Story 14 of 49. U.S. journalist Shelly Kittleson released after Iraq kidnapping by Kataib Hezbollah. U.S. journalist Shelly Kittleson released after Iraq kidnapping by Kataib Hezbollah. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Shelly Kittleson, a 49-year-old freelance journalist from Minnesota, was kidnapped in Baghdad on March 31, 2026, from a street corner in broad daylight. Kataib Hezbollah, an Iran-backed Iraqi militia, announced Kittleson's release on April 7, 2026, with the condition that she leave Iraq immediately. Kittleson was released in exchange for the freedom of several Kataib Hezbollah members previously detained by Iraqi authorities. Kataib Hezbollah cited appreciation of the patriotic stances of the outgoing Iraqi Prime Minister, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, as the reason for her release. Kittleson had lived abroad for years, including in Rome, and worked as a journalist in Iraq and Syria before her abduction. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states that Kittleson was transferred to a second car after the first crashed, while Newskamau does not explicitly mention this detail. Newskamau references surveillance footage showing the abduction, but The Guardian does not mention this footage. The Guardian notes that Kataib Hezbollah had not previously acknowledged responsibility for Kittleson's abduction, while Newskamau implies the group's statement on April 7 was their first acknowledgement of involvement. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Story 15 of 49. Queensland expands adult crime, adult time laws amid low juvenile offence rates. Queensland expands adult crime, adult time laws amid low juvenile offence rates. Here's what every outlet agrees on. No children under 18 were charged with aiding suicide or stupefying to commit an indictable offence between 2015 and 2025. The Queensland government is expanding its adult crime, adult time laws to include 12 new offences, bringing the total to 45 offences under the regime. Between 2015 and 2025, 3,022 juveniles were charged with assault occasioning bodily harm, armed, in company, or involving social media publication. The government is overriding the Queensland Human Rights Act to implement the expansion, citing an exceptional crisis situation in youth crime. Youth Justice Minister Laura Gerber stated that victim numbers are down 7.2% and crime is down as a result of the laws. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the government's previous tranche of adult crime legislation included 6 offences that had not been committed in the period covered, while ABC does not mention this specific detail. ABC notes that the government's data excludes instances where an offence was dealt with outside the court system, while The Guardian does not specify this exclusion. The Guardian claims the government's secret panel's advice was not released, while ABC does not mention the secrecy of the panel's process. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 16 of 49. Jasveen Sangha sentenced for ketamine distribution linked to Matthew Perry's death. Jasveen Sangha sentenced for ketamine distribution linked to Matthew Perry's death. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jasveen Sangha, also known as the Ketamine Queen, pleaded guilty to 5 felony drug counts in September 2025, including 1 count of distributing ketamine resulting in death. Matthew Perry died on October 28, 2023, aged 54, from an acute ketamine overdose after being found face down in a hot tub at his Los Angeles home. Sangha admitted to selling 50 to 51 vials of ketamine to Eric Fleming, who supplied Perry through his assistant Kenneth Iwamasa, who injected him with the fatal dose. Sangha operated a drug distribution network from her home in North Hollywood, Los Angeles, since at least 2019, selling ketamine and meth. Sangha also admitted to selling ketamine to Cody McClory, who died in 2019 shortly after purchasing the drug. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Sangha is 42 years old, while ABC refers to her as JV Sangha, potentially a typo, but does not specify her age in the article. The Guardian mentions Sangha's plea agreement was made in 2025, while ABC does not specify the year of her plea but states it was in September. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 17 of 49. Australia seeks fuel supply security amid Middle East conflict and global energy crisis. Australia seeks fuel supply security amid Middle East conflict and global energy crisis. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese is travelling to Singapore, April 2026, to discuss fuel supply security, with the trip brought forward from its original schedule. Singapore supplies 26% of Australia's refined fuel imports, 55% of Australia's petrol, 22% of jet fuel, and 15% of diesel. Australia's fuel stockpiles are currently at 39 days of petrol, 30 days of jet fuel, and 29 days of diesel, with supplies guaranteed well into May, as of April 2026. Albanese spoke with Chinese Premier Li Qiang on April 4, 2026, to discuss energy security and increase government-to-government communication. Australia imports 90% of its liquid fuels, with Singapore being its largest supplier of petrol. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states that wholesale unleaded prices stopped falling on April 7, 2026, while ABC does not specify a date for the halt in price declines. The Guardian mentions that diesel prices rose by 10 cents per litre after a brief reprieve, but ABC does not provide a specific figure for diesel price changes. The Guardian reports that 241 petrol stations had run out of diesel, while ABC does not provide an exact number but confirms localized shortages. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Story 18 of 49. Australian couple buys and renovates a French chateau as a labour of love. Australian couple buys and renovates a French chateau as a labour of love. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The couple purchased Château de la Roche-Joubert in France. The chateau is located in the Dordogne region of France. The purchase price was equivalent to the cost of a 1- or 2-bedroom apartment in Sydney. The couple has been renovating since their marriage in 1992, starting with a 1-bedroom Edwardian flat in Sydney's North Shore. The couple's first house renovation was a California bungalow in Fairlight, Sydney, after their children were born. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 19 of 49. Winx's $10 million foal Quinceañera retired from racing to become broodmare. Winx's $10 million foal Quinceañera retired from racing to become broodmare. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Quinceañera, the first live foal of champion mare Winx, was sold at auction for a world record $10 million in 2024. Quinceañera was retired from racing before ever competing, with her owners announcing she will become a broodmare at Coolmore Stud in the Hunter Valley. Debbie Kepitis of Wapit Bloodstock is the owner of Quinceañera, who won a bidding war in 2024 to purchase the filly. Quinceañera is sired by Coolmore Stud star stallion Pierrot and is the daughter of Winx, who won 33 consecutive races, including 25 Group 1 victories. The decision to retire Quinceañera was made following veterinary advice and consultation with trainer Chris Waller. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Quinceañera is 4 years old in 2026, while SMH does not explicitly state her age but implies she is 3. Both sources confirm her birth year as 2023, so this is a minor discrepancy in phrasing. ABC describes Quinceañera's retirement as occurring in April 2026 with a specific date of April 9, while SMH reports the announcement was made on April 8, 2026. Both are close but distinct publication dates. This story was covered by ABC News and Sydney Morning Herald. Story 21 of 49. 4 new arrests in Adelaide murder probe of Chris Robertson, linked to Dylan Danaher case. 4 new arrests in Adelaide murder probe of Chris Robertson, linked to Dylan Danaher case. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Chris Robertson, a 49-year-old father of 2 from Moana, was found deceased in a Lonsdale workshop on September 30, 2025, with injuries consistent with an assault. Robertson was last seen alive on AFL Grand Final Day, September 27, 2025, celebrating the event. Dylan Danaher, a 30-year-old former Hells Angel from Happy Valley, was charged with Robertson's murder on December 11, 2025, and is next due to appear in court on July 7, 2026. 4 additional suspects were arrested and charged with offenses connected to the murder: a 33-year-old woman from Happy Valley, 2 counts of assisting an offender, 1 count of threats reprisals, a 61-year-old man from Happy Valley, 2 counts of assisting an offender, and 2 men from Christie's Beach, aged 29 and 27, each charged with 1 count of threats reprisals. All 4 new suspects were refused police bail and are expected to appear at Adelaide Magistrates Court on April 9, 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the 4 new suspects were refused bail and are expected to appear at Adelaide Magistrates Court on Thursday, while ABC does not specify the exact day beyond later today, April 9, 2026. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Story 22 of 49. Savannah Guthrie returns to NBC's Today Show after her mother's disappearance. Savannah Guthrie returns to NBC's Today Show after her mother's disappearance. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Savannah Guthrie returned to NBC's Today Show on April 7, 2026, for the first time since her mother Nancy Guthrie disappeared on February 1, 2026. Nancy Guthrie, 84, was last seen in the foothills outside Tucson, Arizona, and authorities believe she was taken against her will. Savannah Guthrie wore a yellow dress during her return, referencing the yellow flowers left outside her mother's home. The FBI released surveillance videos showing a masked man on Nancy Guthrie's porch and confirmed recovering DNA from a glove found near the home, though no match was found. Savannah Guthrie's family offered a $1 million reward for information leading to Nancy Guthrie's recovery. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC article states that the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie was not mentioned during the first hour of the show on April 7, 2026, while the Guardian article does not mention this detail. The ABC article mentions that Savannah Guthrie wore a yellow dress as a nod to yellow flowers left outside her mother's home, while the Guardian article does not explicitly mention the yellow dress but confirms the yellow ribbon theme on co-hosts' lapels. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 23 of 49. Teen cyclist dies in Canberra Park accident, police investigate. Teen cyclist dies in Canberra Park accident, police investigate. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 14-year-old boy died after a cycling accident at Canberra's Stromlo Forest Park on April 8, 2026, around 2:40 p.m. The boy was treated at the scene with life-threatening injuries before being taken to hospital, where he later died. ACT Road Policing's major collision team is investigating the incident, and a report will be prepared for the coroner. Police are urging witnesses who have not yet spoken to them to contact Crime Stoppers. Stromlo Forest Park is a popular destination for cyclists and mountain bikers, covering 1,200 hectares. ABC notes 50 kilometers of mountain biking trails. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the park has over 50 kilometers of mountain biking trails, while Newscomau does not specify a trail length but describes extensive trails, running tracks, and equestrian paths. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Story 24 of 49. Kyle Sandilands and Jackie O. Henderson sue Kiis FM over contract termination after on-air dispute. Kyle Sandilands and Jackie O. Henderson sue Kiis FM over contract termination after on-air dispute. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jackie O. Henderson and Kyle Sandilands were co-hosts of the top-rated Kiis FM breakfast show, The Kyle and Jackie O Show, which was Australia's top-rated FM breakfast program in Sydney for 56 consecutive surveys before its termination. Both hosts signed 10-year contracts worth $100 million each with Commonwealth Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, a subsidiary of ARN Media, in 2025. The on-air dispute that led to the termination occurred on the 20th of February, 2026, when Sandilands mocked Henderson's interest in astrology, calling her off with the fairies and almost unworkable. Henderson walked off air on the 20th of February, 2026 and did not return, leading to the show's immediate cancellation on the 3rd of March, 2026. Henderson sent a text message to Kiis FM network head Derek Bargwanna on the 11th of September, 2025, stating listeners were complaining about an abusive relationship between her and Sandilands. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Sandilands was terminated on the 18th of March, 2026, while the ABC implies his termination followed Henderson's departure on the 3rd of March, 2026 without specifying the exact date. ARN Media announced Henderson had resigned on the 3rd of March, 2026, but Henderson herself denied resigning and stated she was deeply saddened by the events. The Guardian reports Sandilands was suspended and issued a breach notice before termination, while the ABC does not explicitly mention a suspension period. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 25 of 49. 2026 NBL Finals, Sydney Kings vs Adelaide 36ers Game 5 decider and outcome. 2026 NBL Finals, Sydney Kings vs Adelaide 36ers Game 5 decider and outcome. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The 2026 NBL Finals series between the Sydney Kings and Adelaide 36ers was tied 2-2 heading into Game 5. Game 5 of the 2026 NBL Finals was played at the Sydney Superdome, Olympic Park, on April 5, 2026. Kendrick Davis, Sydney Kings, and Bryce Cotton, Adelaide 36ers, were the top players in the series, with Cotton winning the 2025-26 NBL MVP by 2 votes over Davis. The Sydney Kings won the 2026 NBL Championship in Game 5 with a final score of 113-101, including overtime. Kendrick Davis scored 35 points and 14 assists in Game 5, earning him the series MVP. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 and 2, ABC, describe Game 5 as a decider with Adelaide as underdog, but Article 3, Guardian, states the Kings won in overtime, making the outcome clear before the game. Article 1, ABC, mentions the Kings won Game 2 of the series, but Article 3, Guardian, implies the Kings lost Game 1, 44-point loss, and won Game 2, which is not explicitly stated in Article 1. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 26 of 49. Reece Walsh's injury and Queensland's Origin I fullback options. Reece Walsh's injury and Queensland's Origin I fullback options. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Reece Walsh suffered a fractured cheekbone in the Broncos' 26-12 win over Gold Coast on the 5th of April, 2026, Saturday night, during the first half. Walsh is expected to be sidelined for 4 to 6 weeks due to the injury. Walsh will undergo surgery on the 6th of April, 2026, Sunday, for the fractured cheekbone. Queensland's State of Origin I match is scheduled for the 27th of May, 2026 in Sydney. Ben Hunt, Broncos, is ruled out for a similar timeframe, 4 to 6 weeks, with an MCL injury. But not all outlets told the same story. The SMH mentions Ben Hunt is ruled out for a similar timeframe, 4 to 6 weeks, with an MCL injury, but the ABC does not mention Hunt's injury status at all. The SMH states Walsh suffered a Category 1 HIA late in the first half, but the ABC does not mention this specific detail. This story was covered by ABC News and Sydney Morning Herald. Story 27 of 49. Matildas and Japan criticize pay inequality in Women's Asian Cup prize money. Matildas and Japan criticize pay inequality in Women's Asian Cup prize money. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The 2026 Women's Asian Cup had a prize pool of $2.62 million, $1.8 million, the lowest paying continental tournament in the world. The 2023 Men's Asian Cup had a prize pool of $21.54 million, $14.8 million, compared to $2.62 million for the 2026 Women's Asian Cup. Japan defeated Australia 1-0 in the Women's Asian Cup final on March 21, 2026, at Stadium Australia in Sydney. The 2026 Women's Asian Cup attracted a record 355,528 fans across Perth, Gold Coast, and Sydney. The Matildas and Japan released a joint statement on April 2, 2026, criticizing the prize money inequality and calling for equal pay. But not all outlets told the same story. The publication date for Article 1, SBS, is unknown, while Article 2, ABC, is dated April 2, 2026. This story was covered by ABC News and SBS News. Story 28 of 49. Australia sweeps ODI series against West Indies with Alana King's 5-wicket haul. Australia sweeps ODI series against West Indies with Alana King's 5-wicket haul. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia won the third ODI by 9 wickets in St Kitts, completing a 3-0 series sweep over West Indies. Alana King took 5 wickets for 19 runs, 5/19ths, in the match, named Player of the Match. Australia chased down 137, or 136, runs for the loss of 1 wicket in 20 overs. Phoebe Litchfield scored 68 not out and Elise Perry 33 not out in the run chase. West Indies were bowled out for 136, or 137, runs in 35.4 overs. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states West Indies were bowled out for 136, while ABC states 137, likely a typographical difference in target versus total. The Guardian mentions King's 5/19ths as her second-best ODI figures after the 18th of July at the World Cup last year, but ABC does not specify the comparison. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 29 of 49. Daniil Medvedev's 6-0 loss to Matteo Berrettini at Monte Carlo Masters. Daniil Medvedev's 6-0 loss to Matteo Berrettini at Monte Carlo Masters. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Daniil Medvedev lost 6-0 to Matteo Berrettini at the Monte Carlo Masters on April 8, 2026, marking his first career double bagel defeat in 626 matches. Medvedev smashed his racket 6 times during the match, including a final smash before placing the remnants in a bin. The match lasted 49 minutes, with Medvedev committing 27 to 28 unforced errors and 5 double faults. Matteo Berrettini described the win as one of the best performances of my life and noted he missed only 3 shots in the match. This was Berrettini's first 6-0 win at the tour level and his first over a top 10 player since defeating Alexander Zverev in Monte Carlo 2025. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Medvedev committed 28 unforced errors, while The Guardian reports 27 unforced errors. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 30 of 49. Australian War Memorial faces backlash over Ben Roberts-Smith display amid war crimes charges. Australian War Memorial faces backlash over Ben Roberts-Smith display amid war crimes charges. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ben Roberts-Smith was arrested at Sydney Airport on April 9, 2026, and charged with 5 counts of the war crime of murder. The Australian War Memorial's Hall of Valour currently displays Roberts-Smith's military uniform, helmet, and medals alongside other Victoria Cross recipients. The interpretive panel next to Roberts-Smith's display previously stated he has not been charged with any offence under criminal law, despite a 2023 federal court ruling finding he was a war criminal on the balance of civil probability. The Australian War Memorial has announced it will review the wording of the interpretive panel associated with Roberts-Smith's display but will keep the uniform and equipment on display for now. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese declined to comment on the arrest, stating he would not interfere with matters before the courts. But not all outlets told the same story. The Age states Roberts-Smith was charged on April 9, 2026, while ABC reports his arrest occurred on April 9 but does not explicitly state the charging date in the provided excerpt. The Age describes Roberts-Smith's Victoria Cross display as including uniform and equipment alongside another warrior, while ABC simply states the display includes uniform and medals. The Age mentions Roberts-Smith's defamation case against 9 newspapers was referenced on the plaque, while ABC notes the text was changed after the defamation case but does not specify the exact wording. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Story 31 of 49. Olympic cyclist Rohan Dennis responds to media coverage after wife Melissa Hoskins' death. Olympic cyclist Rohan Dennis responds to media coverage after wife Melissa Hoskins' death. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Melissa Hoskins died in December 2023 after being struck by Rohan Dennis's car near their Adelaide home. Rohan Dennis pleaded guilty in May 2025 to an aggravated act likely to cause harm, not charged with causing death, and received a 17-month suspended sentence. Dennis was given a 2-year good behavior bond and a 5-year license suspension during sentencing in May 2025. The couple argued about kitchen renovations before the incident, with Hoskins jumping onto Dennis's car bonnet as he drove away. Judge Ian Press ruled Dennis was not criminally responsible for Hoskins' death, stating she fell after holding onto the car as it accelerated. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Dennis's car drove down the street after Hoskins fell, while ABC specifies it drove about 75 meters down the lane before the incident. The Guardian implies Dennis's Porsche post was made in March 2026, while ABC does not specify a month but confirms it was last month, April 2026, when reporting the incident. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 32 of 49. Travel advice on flights, destinations, and holiday planning. Travel advice on flights, destinations, and holiday planning. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Once a flight ticket is paid and issued, airlines cannot retroactively add fuel surcharges or increase the fare. If flight dates, routes, or flights are altered after booking, the ticket may be repriced at the prevailing rate, including new fuel surcharges. Reykjavik's Blue Lagoon operates over Christmas and requires advance booking. Reykjavik experiences roughly 19 hours of darkness in late December, maximizing Northern Lights visibility. Guided Northern Lights tours in Reykjavik typically run even over Christmas, departing in the evening. But not all outlets told the same story. Both sources mention Sapphire in Tasmania as a recommended luxury retreat, but neither specifies the exact name of the accommodation, missing in both. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 33 of 49. Australia introduces nasal spray flu vaccine for children, boosting vaccination rates. Australia introduces nasal spray flu vaccine for children, boosting vaccination rates. Here's what every outlet agrees on. FluMist nasal spray vaccine is approved in Australia for children aged 24 months to under 18 years old by the Therapeutic Goods Administration, TGA. The nasal spray vaccine, FluMist, is a live attenuated influenza vaccine, containing weakened flu strains to stimulate immune response without causing illness. Australia's flu vaccination rates for children under 5 dropped from 44.6% in 2020 to 25.7% by September 2025, according to the National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance. Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, and Western Australia are offering FluMist for free to specific age groups: Queensland, 2 to 5, NSW, 2 to 4, SA, 2 to 5, WA, 2 to 11. The nasal spray vaccine is available privately nationwide for about $40 to $70, depending on location, for those outside funded age ranges or states. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states NSW is offering FluMist for free to children aged 2 to 4, while ABC and Newscom.au list NSW's age range as 2 to 4 but do not contradict the Guardian's specific detail. However, Newscom.au does not mention NSW's free offer explicitly, only listing it as one of the states offering it for free. The Guardian reports NSW had 25.7% flu vaccination coverage for children under 5 by September 2025, while ABC states 25.7% but does not specify NSW alone, only Australia-wide. ABC mentions FluMist is available privately for $40 to $45 in Queensland, while The Guardian states $50 to $70 for those outside funded states, with no overlap in exact pricing. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Story 34 of 49. Australian travel alternatives to popular overseas destinations. Australian travel alternatives to popular overseas destinations. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Lord Howe Island is suggested as an alternative to Hawaii, US, with a 2-hour flight from Sydney or Brisbane. Tasmania is proposed as a substitute for Burgundy, France, with wineries in Derwent Valley, Coal River Valley, Huon Valley, and Tamar. The Barrington Coast, NSW, is recommended instead of Sardinia, Italy, with Bluey's Beach and Elizabeth Beach mentioned as alternatives. Mornington Peninsula, Vic, is suggested as a replacement for Piedmont, Italy, with Tedesca Osteria and Barragunda mentioned. Lady Elliot Island, Queensland, is proposed as an alternative to the Red Sea, Egypt, with a 40-minute flight from Hervey Bay or 1.5-hour flight from Brisbane. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 35 of 49. Australian trucking industry faces collapse due to soaring fuel costs, Fair Work Commission emergency hearing. Australian trucking industry faces collapse due to soaring fuel costs, Fair Work Commission emergency hearing. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Fair Work Commission hearing on fuel costs for trucking businesses began on Wednesday, April 7, 2026, at 10 a.m. in Sydney. The Transport Workers Union, TWU, National Secretary Michael Cain stated that owner-drivers, small business owners, and gig workers are weeks away from going out of businesses due to fuel costs. The emergency application calls for major transport clients, retailers, manufacturers, mining companies, to conduct weekly fuel reviews linked to Australian Institute of Petroleum Prices. The Fair Work Amendment, Fairer Fuel, bill was passed by Federal Parliament on March 31, 2026, to fast-track emergency applications in the road transport sector. The deadline for financial relief for drivers, as highlighted by transport groups, is April 21, 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 and Article 3 mention 45 people have died in truck crashes this year, including 14 drivers, but this statistic is not confirmed by ABC. Article 1 and Article 3 state transport company liquidations have risen 48% from last year, but this figure is not mentioned in ABC. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Story 36 of 49. Man arrested for murder after attempting to flee Melbourne Airport. Man arrested for murder after attempting to flee Melbourne Airport. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 67-year-old man from Patterson Lakes was arrested on Friday while attempting to board an international flight at Melbourne Airport. The woman's body was found in the vicinity of Little River Road and the Princes Freeway in Little River, southwest of Melbourne. The 53-year-old missing woman was from Dandenong and was reported missing on Thursday after not contacting family as expected. The accused has been charged with 1 count of murder and remanded in custody, with a court appearance scheduled for Sunday. The body was discovered on Saturday afternoon, and police believe it is the missing woman, though formal identification has not been confirmed. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 37 of 49. Matt Canavan's Patriot Agenda for Australia's Economic Revival and Policy Shifts. Matt Canavan's Patriot Agenda for Australia's Economic Revival and Policy Shifts. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Matt Canavan will deliver his first National Press Club address as Nationals leader on the 7th of April, 2026, outlining an economic revolution centred on scrapping net zero emissions, rebuilding manufacturing, and a national works programme. Canavan will call for abandoning Australia's net zero emissions target, arguing it has increased power prices, hurt industry, and increased reliance on imports. The plan includes infrastructure projects like dams, roads, rail, ports, and spaceports, with a focus on regional development and decentralising population growth. Canavan will advocate for tariffs to protect Australian industries, e.g., steel, from overseas imports, citing Australia's reliance on foreign steel despite being a major exporter of iron ore and coking coal. The speech will propose measures to boost Australia's birth rate, including tax incentives for dual-income households and promoting work-from-home policies to encourage regional relocations. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau claims Canavan will say we have never experienced a reduction in living standards like we are seeing today, while ABC does not explicitly quote this exact claim. News Kamau emphasises Canavan's criticism of subsidies for heavy industry, while ABC focuses more on tariffs for steel protection without mentioning subsidies. News Kamau describes Canavan's speech as ending on optimism, while ABC frames it as a grand vision without explicit mention of tone. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Story 38 of 49. Iran's blockade of Strait of Hormuz disrupts global shipping and oil markets amid US-Israel war. Iran's blockade of Strait of Hormuz disrupts global shipping and oil markets amid US-Israel war. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Pre-war daily ship traffic through the Strait of Hormuz exceeded 130 vessels, with about 20% of global oil and LNG passing through. Since the start of the war, Iran has allowed only 7 ships to transit the strait in the 24 hours after its conditional lift of the blockade, April 8 to 9, 2026. Iran reportedly told mediators it would limit ship transits to about a dozen per day as part of the ceasefire. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have imposed a de facto toll system requiring ships to submit documentation, undergo geopolitical vetting, and pay up to $2 million per vessel, settled in yuan. Iran's parliament approved a plan to formally collect tolls from merchant ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, framing it as a security fee. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Iran conditionally lifted its blockade on April 8, 2026, allowing safe passage for 2 weeks, while News Kamau implies Iran has not reopened the strait and is instead tightening control via tolls and vetting. ABC states Iran's blockade began after the US and Israel bombed Iran on February 28, 2026, while News Kamau does not specify a start date but refers to a blockade weeks ago. ABC claims Iran's Revolutionary Guards shared a mine avoidance map to help ships navigate, while News Kamau does not mention this and instead focuses on tolls and geopolitical vetting. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Story 39 of 49. The Testament sequel series based on Margaret Atwood's novel arrives on Disney+. The Testament sequel series based on Margaret Atwood's novel arrives on Disney+. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Testaments is a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, based on Margaret Atwood's 2019 novel of the same name. And Dowd reprised her role as Aunt Lydia in The Testaments. The series focuses on young women in Gilead's elite preparatory school, including Agnes, Chase Infiniti, and Daisy, Lucy Halliday. The Testaments TV series is set 4 years after The Handmaid's Tale, unlike the 15-year gap in the novel. Aunt Lydia's character evolves from a ruthless disciplinarian to a more vulnerable, remorseful figure in The Testaments. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC article states The Testaments is set 4 years after The Handmaid's Tale, while The Guardian does not explicitly contradict this but focuses more on its YA tone without specifying the timeline difference from the novel. The ABC article emphasizes Aunt Lydia's gentler countenance in The Testaments, while The Guardian leaves her character evolution ambiguous, stating whether this is the old Aunt Lydia or the new, post-Epiphany model remains to be seen. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 40 of 49. Myanmar junta chief Minit Aung Hlaing appointed president after disputed election. Myanmar junta chief Minit Aung Hlaing appointed president after disputed election. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Minit Aung Hlaing was appointed president of Myanmar on April 3, 2026, following a parliamentary vote. Minit Aung Hlaing orchestrated a coup against Aung San Suu Kyi's government on February 1, 2021. Aung San Suu Kyi has been detained since the 2021 coup, and her party, the NLD, was banned from the 2025 to 2026 elections. The military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party, USDP, won a landslide in the December 2025 to January 2026 elections, which were widely condemned as a sham. Minit Aung Hlaing is wanted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity against the Rohingya Muslim minority. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Minit Aung Hlaing is 69 years old, while the ABC does not specify his age but refers to him as the 69-year-old general, no direct contradiction, but the ABC does not provide additional age details beyond The Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 41 of 49. Woolworths and Coles' expansion of smaller format metro local stores divides Australian cities by income and price. Woolworths and Coles' expansion of smaller format metro local stores divides Australian cities by income and price. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Woolworths converted its Alexandria, Sydney, supermarket to a metro store in 2023, sparking local protests led by the Alexandria Resident Action Group and Lord Mayor Clover Moore. Justin Nolan, Woolworths' then head of metro stores, apologised at a 2023 town hall in Alexandria for not informing residents about the conversion plan. There are now nearly 140 Woolworths Metro and Coles local stores across Australia, up from about 30 Woolworths Metro stores 7 years ago, 2019, and 0 Coles local stores at that time. Woolworths Metro stores are about 600 square metres, a quarter the size of a typical 2,500 SQM Woolworths supermarket, and stock around 10,000 products compared to 28,000 in full-size stores. Woolworths Metro stores in Sydney form a geographic line from Parramatta's southeast to Maroubra, concentrated in inner city, inner west, eastern suburbs, and North Shore areas. But not all outlets told the same story. Both sources are identical. No contradictions exist between SMH and Thej on facts, dates, or events. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 42 of 49. Convicted gang rapist escapes custody during hospital transport in Sydney. Convicted gang rapist escapes custody during hospital transport in Sydney. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Michael Angok, 30, escaped from custody at Bankstown Hospital on April 9, 2026, around 9:30 a.m. Angok was transported from Villawood Immigration Detention Center to Bankstown Hospital before escaping. Angok was convicted of gang raping a 14-year-old girl in Doonside Park in February 2014. Police described Angok as of African appearance, approximately 175 to 180 centimeters tall, thin build, short black hair, last seen wearing a black hooded jumper, grey tracksuit pants, and white Crocs. NSW police deployed specialist units including Raptor Squad, Paul Air, Dog Unit, and Operation Support Group to search for Angok. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Story 43 of 49. Jason Day criticizes Tiger Woods' DUI charge and addiction struggles at Masters 2026. Jason Day criticizes Tiger Woods' DUI charge and addiction struggles at Masters 2026. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tiger Woods was arrested and charged with driving under the influence, DUI, on March 27, 2026, after crashing his car near Jupiter Island, Florida. Tiger Woods checked himself into rehab in Switzerland following his DUI charge. Jason Day, Australian golfer, called Woods' decision to drive selfish for putting others at risk, despite sympathizing with his addiction struggles. Jason Day stated Woods has undergone 25 to 30-something surgeries and acknowledged the risks of painkillers post-surgery. Jason Day expressed Woods as his hero and said he was hard to watch going through his struggles, especially under public scrutiny. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 44 of 49. Gunfight outside Israeli consulate in Istanbul leaves attacker dead. Gunfight outside Israeli consulate in Istanbul leaves attacker dead. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 3 attackers opened fire at police outside the Israeli consulate in Istanbul at 12:15 local time on April 7, 2026. 2 of the attackers were brothers who traveled from Izmit to Istanbul. 1 attacker was killed and 2 police officers were injured in the attack. The attack occurred in front of Yapı Kredi Plaza blocks in Istanbul's Levent business district. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan condemned the attack as a treacherous act of terrorism. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1, SBS, does not specify the number of attackers or injuries, while Article 2, ABC, states 3 attackers were involved, with 1 killed and 2 police officers injured. Article 1, SBS, does not mention the time of the attack, 12:15 local time, the location, Yapı Kredi Plaza blocks, or the involvement of Turkish officials like Erdogan or Sifsi. This story was covered by ABC News and SBS News. Story 45 of 49. Hawthorn defeats Geelong in dramatic Easter Monday AFL match with last-minute win. Hawthorn defeats Geelong in dramatic Easter Monday AFL match with last-minute win. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Hawthorn defeated Geelong by 1 point in a dramatic Easter Monday match, winning 94 seconds before the siren. Jack Gunston scored the winning goal for Hawthorn in the final minute by kicking a loose ball into the post. The match took place at the MCG, Melbourne Cricket Ground, on Easter Monday, April 6, 2026. Geelong led by 6 points before Hawthorn's late comeback. Hawthorn coach Sam Mitchell and defender Chris Scott previously emphasised a shift away from free-flowing football, clogging up the game in the 3rd quarter. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian describes the 3rd quarter as clogged up by Sam Mitchell and Chris Scott, while Newscomau does not mention this tactical shift explicitly. The Guardian highlights Geelong's Mark Blycarves as scoring the best goal of his 299-game career, but Newscomau does not reference this specific moment or player contribution beyond the late comeback. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Story 46 of 49. Moira Deeming wins Victorian Liberal pre-selection after candidate withdrawals. Moira Deeming wins Victorian Liberal pre-selection after candidate withdrawals. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Moira Deeming secured the top spot on the Liberal Party's upper house ticket for the Western Metropolitan Region of Victoria. Moira Deeming was the only eligible nominee remaining after other candidates withdrew. Dinesh Gurisetti, a businessman and Indian community leader, was initially favoured by the party's moderate wing but withdrew after providing a character reference for a now-convicted child sex offender. Moira Deeming previously dropped her candidacy in 2026 after the party favoured Dinesh Gurisetti. Moira Deeming thanked state Liberal leader Jess Wilson for her support. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC states Moira Deeming was expelled from the party room after threatening legal action against John Pessutto, while The Guardian does not specify the exact reason for her expulsion beyond attending a controversial rally. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 47 of 49. Sisters of slain officer sue Victoria Police over negligence in Dezi Freeman case. Sisters of slain officer sue Victoria Police over negligence in Dezi Freeman case. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Detective leading Senior Constable Neil Thompson, 59, was killed by Dezi Freeman on the 26th of August, 2025 in Porpunka, Victoria, along with Senior Constable Vadim de Wart-Hottet, 34, while serving a search warrant. Dezi Freeman was shot dead by police on the 30th of March, 2026 at Tholagolong, Victoria's northeast, after 7 months on the run. The sisters of Neil Thompson, Diane Thompson, and Lois Kirk plan to sue Victoria Police for negligence, citing the failure to deploy specialist forces during the search warrant execution on the 26th of August, 2025. The sisters wrote a letter to Victoria Police Chief Commissioner Mike Bush in December 2025 expressing feelings of being ignored, invisible, and abandoned by police, including inadequate support after Neil's death and at his funeral. Victoria Police acknowledged the sisters' concerns in a statement, confirming direct meetings with them and the appointment of police liaison officers for updates and support. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the sisters were sat away from the front of the chapel at Thompson's funeral, while the ABC does not explicitly mention seating arrangements but focuses on the sisters being ignored by officials. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Story 48 of 49. Carlton AFL team's recent poor form and coach Michael Voss's job security under scrutiny. Carlton AFL team's recent poor form and coach Michael Voss's job security under scrutiny. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Carlton lost to North Melbourne Kangaroos 14.12, 96, to 13.8, 86, on Good Friday, April 4, 2026, at Marvel Stadium, Docklands. Carlton led by 21 points at the 14-minute mark of the final quarter before losing the game. Michael Voss, Carlton's coach, stated in post-match comments, "I'm sure people will have that conversation about his future, they can go for it." Carlton has lost after leading at halftime 9 times since the start of the 2025 season, including the loss to Richmond early last year. Carlton's recent form includes a 1-3 start to the 2026 season, with losses to Melbourne, 43-point lead squandered, and North Melbourne. But not all outlets told the same story. The Age states Carlton's third-quarter win was their 6th in the past 27 games, while ABC does not mention this specific statistic. The Age includes a detailed breakdown of Carlton's statistical rankings: 16th for points, 18th for goals per inside 50 differential, 13th for scores from turnover differential, which ABC does not reference. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Story 49 of 49. Emperor penguins and Antarctic fur seals now endangered due to climate change. Emperor penguins and Antarctic fur seals now endangered due to climate change. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, has reclassified emperor penguins from near-threatened to endangered due to climate change impacts. The IUCN has reclassified Antarctic fur seals from least concern to endangered due to a 50% population decline since 1999, from tilde 2.187 million to 944,000 mature seals in 2025. Emperor penguin population is projected to halve by the 2080s due to sea ice loss, with current population estimated at 595,000 adults. 4 of the 5 known emperor penguin breeding sites in the Bellingshausen Sea collapsed in 2022, leading to the loss of thousands of chicks. Early sea ice breakup is the primary threat to emperor penguins, causing chicks to drown or freeze to death. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the emperor penguin population is estimated at 595,000 adults, while ABC does not provide a specific current population number but references a 10% decline between 2009 and 2018. The Guardian mentions a 10% decline in emperor penguin population between 2009 and 2018, while ABC states a 10% decline but does not specify the timeframe. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian.